Hello, everybody. My name is Graham Elwood, and you are watching The Political Vigilante. We've been talking about it. The verdict just came in. Ghislaine Maxwell found guilty on 5 of 6. This is how CNN, and this is recorded like literally with my iPhone, so it's not great, but just watch this.
Huge case. And what this case really down to, Jim, is whether or not Ghislaine Maxwell knew about the abuse that had been going on for all of these years, and whether or not she was a part of it. That's really the foundation of this. And a jury came back and found that she was guilty of both. The jury made up of 6 men, 6 women, deliberated for 6 days, some 40 hours, and found that she was guilty of 5 of 6 federal counts, including sex trafficking of a minor. The minor in that particular case, a victim named Carolyn, who was victimized between the years of 2001, 2004. Also guilty transporting a minor with the intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, and also 3 related counts of conspiracy. The jury found her not guilty on count 2, which was enticement of an individual under the age of 17 to travel with intent to engage in illegal activity. Again, over the course of this trial, prosecution called 24 witnesses over 10 days or so. The prosecution's case really centered, though, on 4 women who told very graphic, very personal, very detailed descriptions of the abuse that they suffered at the hands of Epstein, also with Maxwell being there. The U.S. Attorney's Office saying in a statement, saying in part, the road to justice has been far too long, but today justice has been done. I want to commend the bravery of the girls, now grown women, who stepped out of the shadows and into the courtroom. Their courage and willingness to face their abuser made this case and today's result possible. Now, Maxwell, a British socialite and former Epstein girlfriend, now faces more than 60 years in prison. And as you know, Jim, for years, the victims in this case had been seeking justice. They were unable to get the justice that they wanted simply because Jeffrey Epstein was unable to be brought to justice because he committed suicide while in custody. Now finally holding Maxwell, who prosecutors called his partner in crime, accountable. Very big day here, Jim.
Absolutely, a huge verdict. All right, CNN's Jason Carroll, thank you very much for that. Let's get more on all of this. The breaking news with CNN legal analyst Elliot Williams, Dave Ehrenberg, the state attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida, where so much of this case.
All right, we're not going to. They go into this is about an 8 or 9 minute interview, but at this point, and I'm going to bring Whitney in a sec. They go through all these people and they talk about it, and one thing they say, they never say that she's a rapist. They say she participated. Now, federal charges, you can't apparently you can't charge someone for that because there's a statute of limitations according to what these lawyers said in the federal thing. But this guy here, when the panelists asked, well, what if she plea bargains because her sentencing hasn't happened yet? What if she says, okay, I'll give you more names. I'll give you more names to get a lesser sentence, right? That's the big question. Now we're going to have Whitney to answer this. This guy said, well, what other bigger names are there? Jeffrey Epstein was the biggest name and he's dead. Oh, I guess we're all good here. I guess that solved it. So, let us bring on from Unlimited Hangout, regular. We've had her on the show numerous times to discuss this very subject. She is literally the first person I texted when I saw this verdict today. Please welcome to the show, Whitney Webb. Whitney, how are you?
Hi, I'm okay. I'm supposed to be on maternity leave. But I wanted to say a couple things, I guess, about what's happened here. In part because I predicted a different outcome. Sorry, I didn't really set up lighting. I haven't been planning to record.
This is a total last minute thing. I literally was like texting you like, hey, dude, what are you free? And you're like, I'm feeding my kid. I'm like, okay, can you go?
I was.
Nuts. I mean, before anything, we should also say I ultimately am glad this verdict came in the sense that it at least is some sort of justice for the victims. Is obviously was what
well, I'm definitely happy to have been wrong because I was a lot more cynical and expected her to get off a lot lighter. But I think there's something, a couple things, weird things that may have led to this verdict. Not that I think we should poo-poo it, right? Because obviously I'm happy that it turned out this way and not what I had originally anticipated, right? But there's a couple different reasons why I think it turned out this way. And as I mentioned, I'm supposed to be on maternity leave, so I haven't been following the trial as closely as I normally would be. But basically, one thing that I thought was really odd is that you had the prosecution come out with their case. There were a lot of criticisms from it. You and I talked about that privately the other day on the phone, but other people and myself on Twitter and other commentators had noted that the prosecutors had left out some major things. They could have called a lot more accusers than they did, among other things. They ignored the blackmail intelligence angle for obvious reasons, I think. But what was interesting to me is that after that, the defense, when they were getting ready to start, put up there were reports that they planned to call over 30 witnesses, and that they wanted anonymity for a lot of those witnesses, right? And that was, I believe, significantly more than the number of witnesses called by the prosecution. And so people anticipated that the defense was going to, be making their arguments for several weeks, and this trial was going to probably last into January at least, definitely not end this quickly. Instead, after making that request, the defense out of nowhere, basically, I think they lasted like 1 or 2, like 2 days or something. They only called 4 witnesses, and then they were like, bam, and done. It's that's quite a switch, a very dramatic switch at the last second. Which makes me think, because they've been talking about this a lot if you read between the lines in the reports, that the attorneys and the judge, the prosecution and the defense and the judge and all of that have been sort of negotiating among themselves on and off during the whole trial. And that sort of almost makes me think, why would the defense basically throw it in the last minute? Was it because people were accusing the trial of being a sham trial after the prosecutors did what they did and made the decisions they did? All the coverage about Maureen Comey being one of the main prosecuting attorneys, daughter of James Comey, and all of this stuff. And a lot of people calling the trial out for leaving out various things, not having high profile accusers be involved. I think it's really possible that they didn't want, they want to have leave the public with the right impression, so people stop pushing for a broader investigation or broader accountability that reaches outside of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, no, I totally agree. I mean, you and I had a phone conversation about a week or so ago, and I've done several videos on it. I mean, you and I talked about it, and I covered it on my show, all of these very peculiar things, like the Judge Allison Nathan throws out all of this evidence, this hard evidence, and we find out she's in the Skull and Bones sister organization worked with John Kerry and Joe Biden. We find out again, James Comey's daughter. The prosecution only calls 4 eyewitnesses, where like in the Larry Nassar case, there was 150 women that testified against Larry Nassar. And it's like, we could only find 4. I mean, Maria Farmer, who you've interviewed, has been very vocal on Twitter saying, why is only my sister? How come I'm not being, why am I not being allowed to testify? And other Epstein victims have said, why have I not been able to testify? And I feel like, and I was saying the same thing. And again, like I say, I'm happy. I'm so happy to be wrong. I'm so happy to be wrong. I don't want to be right. My question, and this is the thing you and I have talked about, but both together on our shows and separately, is the overall theme. I think anyone that really truly follows the Epstein, they always want to kind of seal it off. And I'm wondering, that's what feels like is maybe starting to happen. And I said, if they do find her guilty, the media is going to put guilty, guilty, guilty all over the place. And then if the actual sentencing is like 18 months in a country club prison, that's going to be announced like literally like Friday night. They're going to announce that like 18 months in a work release, 10, 9, 8, Happy New Year. Like they're just going to go right into and just bury it.
So
and when I heard that guy, I will say real quick, when I heard that guy say, well, what's the point of her? There's nothing for her to bargain with. That's the big thing. You and I and many Epstein people, like Ghislaine has to have all of this physical evidence. That's what they did. They got powerful people on camera having sex with children to use it as leverage. So
the question is, does Ghislaine have a monopoly on that evidence currently, or the people that support her and back her? Did it get spread around after the FBI raided the New York facility or apartment? It seems like the answer to that's actually no, because of some of the testimony given by FBI special agents during the trial. But the question is, how far did that blackmail travel? Who has it now? And we have to keep in mind too that if you look at the case of her father, Robert Maxwell, who was also involved in various espionage activities, he, according to his own family and also a lot of his biographers, the consensus among them is that he was murdered by the same intelligence agency that he was mainly working for, which was Israeli intelligence, the Mossad, when he became a liability, and that tends to happen, and more often than not, in high-profile exposés of intelligence operations they want to memory hole and keep under wraps. They have to throw someone to the wolves. Sometimes they do. Or they at least manage the perception of how that person is sort of taken out of the picture and how the scandal itself is memory holed. This has been, of course, obviously a scandal that they haven't really been able to memory hole effectively at all.
You and I have, said when they killed Epstein in prison 2.5 years ago, it didn't have the desired effect. When you have Lindsey Graham on the floor of Congress saying Epstein didn't kill himself, they don't want that. The billionaire sex trafficking pedophiles don't want this.
No.
They want this to go away. Oh, Epstein killed himself. And they really trying to steer this. And that's one of the things why I showed the CNN, because if you notice, one of the things on that CNN, they kept showing photos of just her and Epstein.
Yeah, and then being all cuddly. She looks like a housewife. That's how the media has really, I think, been more or less on Ghislaine's side this whole time, with headlines like, was she another victim of Epstein? And all these really obnoxious takes. Yeah.
None of the photos that you and I have shown on our show, none of the photos of her with Trump at the Clintons' daughter's wedding.
Yeah. It's just been her and Epstein. But if you notice, the running narrative after, since post Epstein death has been, this was Jeffrey Epstein's idea. He was the naughty boy, and now he's dead and it's done. And even when you have people challenged on their ties to Epstein, like Bill Gates, relatively recently, his response was, well, he's dead. It doesn't matter anymore. What does it matter? He's dead. It's over, and no. And that's why so much damage is done by neglecting to bring up the blackmail intelligence angle, because, that essentially means no one else, by avoiding that, no one else involved in this, what was obviously a broader network with state support, is going to face justice. And that's obviously a huge problem. Better have Ghislaine face justice than nobody, obviously. But, for people that want this as a practice by intelligence agencies or just in general to stop, we can't just stop and be like, oh, all right, Ghislaine's in prison and everything's fine now. Because this was obviously something that goes far beyond just her and Epstein. Sorry about that.
Yeah. And one of the things too, it's the thing you got to pay attention to, especially in the Epstein case, and Maxwell, is what they don't bring up. Like you say, like they won't bring up the intelligence ties. They won't bring that up. They won't bring up last week. They just were in court. It came out. They released 118 new flight logs. Trump was on Epstein's plane 4 more times than we had initially suspected. It's totaling 5 now. Why isn't even CNN?
They're not covering that stuff. Well, also there were binders of people who were filmed with underage girls at Epstein properties where Maxwell was present, and the names of those people they redacted. They also redacted, or what will remain secret is Ghislaine's contact book. So the clientele of Epstein and Maxwell is going to remain unknown, and I'm sure there's lots of other things that will be filed under seal because of the conclusion of this trial. Sorry, there were a couple other things I wanted to bring up. You mentioned sentencing. So as far as I'm aware, and I could be wrong on this, but as far as I'm aware, the jury, right, was involved in finding, the verdict that's come out today. But it's the judge, as I understand it, that's mainly that's going to be in charge of the sentencing. So people are saying 65 years in prison for Ghislaine, but that's if every count is given the maximum sentence. So it could be different. We'll see. But I think the jury may have been a wild card, because we know that the prosecution had the Comey thing, and that there's the defense, and then there's the judge's weird ties and decisions over the course of this trial. It seemed like they had all of those angles controlled, but the jury, they had trouble controlling, because I think in some sense, because they had a lot of trouble picking a jury and finding a jury that didn't really know anything or knew very little about this case. And, they probably ended up with a mix of just regular people, from what I understand, who don't watch the news ever, but watching the testimonies of real victims and people with really compelling stories who have been consistent for decades, like Annie Farmer, probably was much more impactful than whatever, the defense tried to put up as an argument. And, honestly, a lot of the defense's arguments are kind of contradictory in a sense. These girls don't know what they're talking about. Their memories are all confused and blah, 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 says the CIA-linked memory expert or whatever. But at the same time, they're just trying to get money. So they're, they're making it all up. But wait, their memories are tainted, and it's not on purpose. It's because of this weird phenomenon. I don't know. Yeah. I think the jury might have been a wild card in this case, which is possible. But I also think, as I mentioned earlier on, that the defense might have decided to throw it, because how do you go from your plans to call 35 witnesses and do several weeks of arguments, or at least a couple weeks of arguments, and then that becomes just a couple days and 4 witnesses overnight, essentially. There's something odd there. And I think it might have to do with larger concerns about public perception in the U.S. About this trial and what it means more broadly speaking for American trust in institutions. And concern about that with Biden's poll numbers dropping, a lot of flip-flopping recently from top officials in the U.S. on things like COVID-19 policy, just a lot of mixed signals, and with a bunch of different areas in U.S. politics. Could they really have afforded to have let, Ghislaine go and have people be like, public opinion on Twitter and social media in general has been really against Ghislaine. Maybe they were reading between the lines, and that might be why. And if you look at the plans, the agendas, I guess, the white papers and things like that put out by, think tanks and groups linked to the global elite, like the World Economic Forum, or the biggest PR firms in the world, like Edelman PR, their big focus is on trust, on global trust. 2021 and 2022 is the year to rebuild trust in government, public trust in government. So maybe this is, in a sense, related to that. If they, there were efforts to convince the defense to sort of throw this, because I really do think it's odd that they went from, we're going to call 35 witnesses and we want anonymity for a bunch of them, to here are 4, anonymity for nobody. We're going to rest after 2 days, even though we're being paid a bunch of money and we're defending a, intelligence-linked rich person with wealthy and influential siblings. And it just seems odd.
It seems very odd. I think the thing we don't know yet, and what the actual sentencing, I think that's going to tell us what the purpose of this trial really is. Because first of all, it's maddening to me to watch the media. They will not call her a rapist. They just will not call. I know.
Or a pedophile.
They won't use those terms. They'll say out of Epstein, as well they should. He's both of those things. He's a piece of shit. But
the government doesn't call her a rapist either. And they were prosecuting, and they admit in their indictments and during the case and arguments that she was involved in assaults.
I know that's maddening. And I don't know if that's like a cultural thing. Like we just don't view women. We think women can't rape or something. I don't know what the fuck that is. I don't know. What that is.
If you look at the sympathetic tone, like I mentioned earlier, is Ghislaine another victim of Epstein?
Oh, yeah.
I think that's probably more likely as to why in this case they avoided it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because they do want to paint her as this like, golly gee, she got swept up by big bad mean Jeffrey Epstein. Like she was
so in love with him and wanted to get married to him. She was blinded, but from all of his faults. Yeah, it's sad.
She was just wanting to help find models. She didn't know. Like it's just
so I'm in the middle of a 2-part series on Ghislaine. Really, I put out the first part, which mainly focuses on her father and teases some more stuff about her. But this was the sexual blackmail thing was set up in 1990. Set up to start between 1990 and 1991, and a lot of that directly involved her father. Earlier on, and this was planned to be a sex blackmail thing from the beginning because Robert Maxwell, in my upcoming article, he hired consultants to consult his entryism into New York high society, which later numerous articles throughout the 90s talk about Ghislaine's rise in New York social circles as being facilitated directly by Epstein, who had a relationship with Maxwell. Both Maxwells going back to the 1980s. And one of those consultants was a CIA blackmailer, sex blackmailer, going back to the 70s, with a lot of very high-ranking political ties. Why would you bring someone like that on as a consultant if you weren't planning to set up a sex blackmail ring, essentially, to expand your influence empire, which was essentially what Robert Maxwell was trying to do in New York, because his business empire in Europe, based in the UK, was falling apart by then, and he knew that, seeking to seek refuge, in a sense, over in New York. And it went really well for him. But, of course, he didn't spend enough time there, I guess, to be protected. But there's a lot of really crazy stuff that went on in that 91 period, and a lot of weird things going on with Ghislaine. But this is you could even easily argue that she was the mastermind, though I would kind of argue, because she was so under the thumb of her father that it was really his idea, and she was obviously willing to to do it because she did it well after he died and stuff. But this was something set up between her and Epstein and him that was fully, everything it did was planned out from the beginning as soon as it got off the ground.
Yeah. And we, obviously you've done very extensive research on this, but everything that both of us have found and others in this Epstein sort of investigative community have found is all the ties to intelligence. I mean, when I had John Kiriakou on my show 2 years ago, and I asked him about Epstein dying in prison, his first words were this, he called a CIA friend and said, this has to be the Israelis, right? Those are the words that came out of his mouth on my show. Well,
they like sex blackmail, but so does the CIA. And other intelligence agencies. Israel doesn't have a monopoly on that. But if you're familiar with some of Robert Maxwell's antics, like while in Israel, when he had a relationship with Israeli intelligence, it gave him full access to the women used in blackmail operations by the Israeli state within Israel, and he would take full advantage of those their services when he would make visits to Jerusalem and other parts of Israel. So they definitely have a lot of, they do it domestically. The CIA does it domestically too. Yeah. But
I know you're running a little bit out of time, but I want to get your take on this now. What do you think in terms of for me, the sentencing, like I was saying, is going to really determine what this case is all about, because if she bargains down, and because she potentially could do that. It's one of the things several of those legal experts on CNN were saying, is that she could potentially bargain down and say, I'll give up more names.
Yeah, but they don't seem interested in names to me, because then why would they redact all this stuff of the people that came up in the evidence? They don't seem interested in knowing more names. But they may remember with Epstein, right before he got axed, it was, he's willing to talk to the government, and then he disappears. You know, that could be a narrative that's used to segue into Ghislaine gets Epsteined, which is, I think, a possibility that we obviously
do you think though they
can't really ignore? But I don't know. I honestly don't want to say I really know one way or another, because I feel like the Maxwells, being part of the Maxwell family, is sort of a different can of worms than being Epstein, who didn't have those elite family ties that Ghislaine has. Ghislaine has a lot of siblings that are espionage involved and powerful, mainly her her twin sisters behind her. So, you know, they may have some leverage. I don't really know, though, because, you know, if she's deemed to be too much of a liability, you know, they took out Robert Maxwell for that. They'd probably do the same with Ghislaine if they felt it necessary. But I think that's the big question to be answered, is will she be Epsteined?
My question, I mean, obviously, is the threat of her. It all depends on the threat of her having information that she can have really, like I feel like she's got some kill switch. Like, if I go to jail for this many years, like this, all this shit gets released. And if that
could be,
and that's why I feel like if she gets a light sentence and they just announce it at 3 a.m. on New Year's Eve or whatever, then we'll know that's what hhappened. But if they give her a long sentence, and then I don't think they'll flat out kill her like they did Epstein. I think she'll get COVID in prison, and we'll start hearing like she's been having health issues. Like, we'll hear that, and then like, oh, she got sick and died because she had a COVID popsicle or whatever the hell they're going to give her, and just the cameras broke, and oh, whoops, and we gave her the food that had Ebola in it. We kept it in the wrong side of the fridge. Oh, like there's going to be that shit that happened. So that's like, but the other question I have to ask, and I hate being this tinfoil hattie, but again, no, not one goddamn photo of her in jail. I saw her siblings walk out of the courthouse. I've seen photos of that. I've seen photos of the prosecution team, the defense team. I have not seen, or I've only seen sketch drawings of Ghislaine Maxwell. So, I mean, and
in a mess too. So you're only seeing the top bit. I know those of us that are really cynical, and, anytime Maxwell or Epstein's name comes up, it's like instant suspicion. It's like, it's hard to be convinced. And even there's some Epstein victims that are like, is she really where they say she is? Is she really suffering as bad as they say she is? And all this stuff, like her, one of her brothers said, Ghislaine's being treated as poorly as a Gitmo detainee, and all this stuff, is that, I don't know. There have been stories that have come out to try and paint sympathy of that. But it's odd. I don't know. At least because I believe Epstein's case was also like a federal case, but a mugshot of him eventually came out, and they haven't even had that of Ghislaine. So I really like to think that's not the case, but I'm obviously not interested in gatekeeping on any of this. It's very, I will keep, when intelligence is involved, like it is in this case, anything is really possible. So, it just comes down to me saying, in that case, I don't really know, and it's possible, but I hope it's not the case, because she really does deserve to be locked up for what she did. Mm-hmm.
For the rest of her life. Yeah. All right. We'll see what happens. I mean, if she gets a long prison term, then she's going to hang herself with a paper t-shirt or slip and fall on a bag of knives.
Oh, they might get more creative if
my car. I'm literally like, she's going to get COVID and die in prison. And it's going to be like, oh no. Like,
or they may justify it as an early release for her, or, she's in danger of contracting Omicron or something, and use that to get her out.
We'll see her
or
on
something.
Like, taken out on a stretcher, looking all frail.
Or potentially during the sentencing, we already had the judge, I think today or yesterday, say the Omicron variant threatens the trial and deliberations. Maybe during sentencing, she could be like, well, it's so scary that we have to put Ghislaine in this special prison out in the countryside that's like the Martha Stewart prison, you know,
Yeah, that's
Camp Fed, which is, you know, sort of where the way Jeffrey Epstein, when he went to prison the first time, right?
Yeah.
He was in that sort of situation. Will they use something like COVID-19 to sort of justify a similar situation for Ghislaine? I think we shouldn't make broad assumptions about what's happening here until the sentencing happens, because as I mentioned earlier, I think the jury was a wild card in some senses for the powers that be, but the judge is not. She's already been offered, as soon like right before this, the case really started, the trial really started, immediately promoted by Biden, you know, like do what we want and up you'll go, type deal. At least that's how it looked to me. So she's in charge of sentencing as far as I'm aware. So
that's a bad sign. Well, yeah, we'll see. There's, like you say, there's a million little options that they're going to do it. I don't think it'll be
yeah.
as
So you know, in order to like have concrete conclusions about what's happened here, I'd like to wait and see what happened with the sentencing. What happens there, and we don't know when the sentencing date is going to be. It could be months from now, it could be days from now, it could be weeks. You know, maybe they'll draw it out for a long time, so people sort of think, oh yeah, she was found guilty, and people sort of forget and they're like, yeah, justice was served, and then the sentencing comes and it's like, oh well. Or, you know, there's also one thing we didn't discuss is the possibility for an appeal, how long that will take, what the circumstances of an appeal could be, and all of that stuff. So we'll see.
Yeah, if there is a light sentencing, they will announce it like at halftime at the Super Bowl or something when no one's paying attention. I mean, they will literally.
Yeah, probably. But I do have to go here in a second. But
Yes.
The thing I do want to end with is, regardless of what happens here, how much or how little justice is ultimately done in the case of Ghislaine, justice can't and shouldn't stop with Ghislaine Maxwell in this case, just like it shouldn't and didn't stop, I guess, at Epstein. But every effort has been made and will continue to be made by the people that benefited or were targeted, you know, by this particular scheme to keep the truth from really coming out, to protect certain powerful people that were involved, and to keep this from really coming in the information that needs to come out about this. You know, that there's going to be continued efforts to memory hole this, to keep information from the public, and continue doing all of really what's a cover up. You know, maybe they think if they quell public calls for, you know, justice enough, that they can finally memory hole this, and we can't really let them do that. And that's why, again, the blackmail intelligence angle is a key thing to pull on, because, you know, even here with the prosecution, they didn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, and they won't unless people keep pushing. And I think that's the only reason Ghislaine was arrested anyway, is that after Epstein, they couldn't memory hole it. Oh, he's gone, he's dead. Let's memory hole this. It didn't work. And so they were like, okay, well, oh, look, we finally found Ghislaine. You know, not like they didn't know, the NSA didn't know where she was the whole time or something, right? And so I think we need to keep pushing, because that seems, at least in this case, the more the public complains and is vocal about this, the more effects seem to be, the more effect this seems to have. So if we can, you know, regardless of what happens here in the Ghislaine case, I think it's really important to continue pushing on the blackmail intelligence angle, things like Prince Andrew and, you know, other big names. The pushing needs to keep happening, because this is really something much bigger than Epstein and Maxwell. You know, this is something that potentially, in my opinion, compromised a litany of politicians in the U.S. and abroad. You know, sexual blackmail used to control policy, and that the U.S. And other countries for decades have been essentially ruled by blackmail, not by democracy, and that we're given this illusion of democracy. You know, obviously all of that stuff, they don't want to have to deal and have to explain all of that on CNN, right? But I think, you know, we have to keep pushing, because there's obviously more to come out and more justice that needs to be served in this case.
Well, Whitney, thank you for taking time. I know you're busy, and please check out Whitney's stuff at rockfin.com, Unlimited Hangout, and follow. Where are all the other places people can
Or
follow?
unlimitedhangout.com is my website where I'm putting out articles. So I have part 1 up on the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, and I have a part 2 that, depending on new mom stuff, will hopefully be out soon. But you never know with that sort of stuff. So we'll see. But a lot of really juicy stuff yet to come from my Epstein research. So for people that are interested in this case, I would encourage you to keep tabs on that. And if you go to my website, you can subscribe to my newsletter in case I get booted off of Twitter or whatever at some point. And you can be informed of, new articles, new podcasts, and all of that stuff. Interviews I do on other programs like yours via email. Best way to follow things. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And everybody, please hit the like button, subscribe. We've been demonetized by YouTube. So for 11 months now. So please support everything that we're doing. Go to GrahamElwood.com, go to rockfin.com/GrahamElwood. And it's blockchain cryptocurrency. They do not censor us over there. And Whitney, myself, and about a dozen other really good indie media journalists are all out there of all varying different types. So check that out. Whitney, thank you so much. Congrats on being a new mom again. And thanks for being on our show. And really thank you for all the hard work you're doing. And I know the Epstein victims appreciate all the work you've done.
Thank you. All right. Take care, Graham. Bye-bye.
Right, see you later. Bye. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching. We are still in our 9th month of demonetization from YouTube. So support what we're doing at patreon.com/GrahamElwood or rockfin.com/GrahamElwood, which is a blockchain cryptocurrency platform. It's free to sign up, and there's a premium level at $10 a month. And for that, you get everybody on the platform's premium content. Myself, Lee Camp, Ron Placone, Jimmy Dore, Whitney Webb, Kim Iverson, Abby Martin, and many, many others. You can also support what we're doing at Venmo at Graham-Elwood. And go to GrahamElwood.com. We have a PayPal button and a PO box. I also have crypto wallets, which are all in the show notes. Thanks for supporting what we do.